Coaches, welcome back to another episode of the Kansas FCA Coaches Corner. If you've missed any of the previous episodes, go back to our YouTube channel, the Kansas FCA channel there. All of them are archived and ready for you to watch. Had a lot of great conversations, and certainly today we would think it's going to be another great conversation. We are joined by Morgan Elzinga, the coach at Sterling College. Coach, first of all, thank you so much for being here. What we always like to do is just kind of unpack your story a little bit. What has been your experience as a player, and I know you've been a GA and an assistant, and now this is going into year number 2 of being a head coach. So what brought you to Sterling? What's been your experience as a player and as a coach?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I am from Central Wisconsin. I went to school at Trinity International University. It's in the north suburbs of Chicago. So I played there for 4 years. Had an awesome experience, a lot of fun, a lot of growth, and a lot of success on the field. I stayed at Trinity as a GA. So I stayed there 2 years after. Actually, I spent a little bit of time in between overseas doing sports ministry in Zambia. But stayed at Trinity for 2 more years. I'm getting my master's in leadership, mostly just to learn from my head coach there. He's brilliant, and so wanted to spend 2 more years with him, just learning and growing as much as I could. After Trinity, I got a position as an assistant coach at Union University in Tennessee. So I moved to Tennessee. That lasted 1 season before I heard of this position at Sterling. My assistant coach at Trinity actually moved to Sterling with her husband, who is a football coach here. And so one day she gave me a call and asked if I was interested in the position, and just a lot of ties between Trinity and Sterling. And so came out for an interview. Wasn't sure at first how I felt about the small town, but ended up loving it. And so, then I came here last January, and have been here going into my 2nd season now, and ready for it for sure.
It's awesome. Wisconsin to Tennessee to Kansas. That's a big jump. Keith's usually on this call. He's not on here today, but he usually asks kind of the testimony question. So, how'd you come to faith in Christ, and what does that look like for you in your walk?
Yeah, so I was raised in a home that Jesus was the center of it. My dad's a pastor, and so I was raised in the church. I was, grew up as a little kid knowing the Lord, but I think it was in high school that I really started to understand my faith. I spent 2 summers in high school with an organization called Teen Missions. And so went to Uganda for 2 months as a 15-year-old, and then Zambia for 2 months as a 16-year-old. And there were definitely, the Lord has continued to work through my life and show us faithfulness. But I think those summers really revealed more of, I think that was probably the first time that I understood the full gospel and understood the depth of my sin and the great need for Jesus. And just those 2 summers were critical in my walk of what it looked like to be in the Word and be with other believers and do ministry. And so that was big in kind of, critical years of high school. And then college was definitely a huge part of my testimony. Just being at a school where I was centered on Christ in my education, but I would say even more than that, just the impact that my soccer experience was at Trinity was huge in my walk, just because, it was more than soccer. And so I was not just playing on a good team and with a good program and having success on the field, but I was really being discipled off the field as a player. And so I've known the Lord my whole life, but I think it's just continuing to grow deeper in a relationship with Him. And college, I would say, was huge in just setting me up for what that looks like in my life as a coach, what it looks like in my life is just a believer of Jesus, but then how that impacts everything. And so I would say it's a story of God's faithfulness. I don't have one of those crazy, one instant life impact testimonies, but it's just been awesome to see God's faithfulness in my life, and having parents who taught me to love Jesus as a young kid, but then I'm just seeing, my hunger for the Lord continue to grow throughout the years, and that pouring out into what I do.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That's cool. It's a great blessing on your parents, right? I think Scripture talks a lot about the generational obedience of raising your kids in the fear of the Lord, and then generations are blessed because of that. So that's awesome. How does Jesus, let me ask you this, how does Jesus affect your coaching? Because I think sometimes we maybe try to compartmentalize some things. And I heard Dabo Sweeney say something on, it was an FCA webinar or something a few weeks back about how you can't turn your Christianity on and off, right? And so I think Sterling is kind of a faith-based school. I know you do some stuff with FCA there, maybe with Aaron, I'm not sure. But how does Jesus affect your coaching? And then maybe what do you do with your team just to instill some of that in them?
Right. Yeah. I think Jesus affects my coaching in all aspects. I think what you're saying about Christianity being on and off is you can't have that. And I think that's one of those things that's huge. And so it affects every aspect of my coaching because it affects who I am as a person. And so my faith is directly intertwined with how I coach, from everything, right? I think the biggest thing is my relationships with my players, right? That I'm going to be there for them, and they're going to know that my faith makes me who I am, and they're going to play for me, and that's going to be a huge aspect of it. So I think just how I interact with my players and just doing life on life with them is a big way, right? But I think it's also important that you can't just live and look like you're a good person, right? You have to incorporate speech into that and let people know why you're that way, right? If I'm just a good person and love my players well, they need to know why I do that. And so we integrate it a lot into everything we do. I think I have a unique team where I have girls coming from all aspects of life and they've all been raised differently. So some have been raised in the church their whole life. Some have just been introduced to it from coming to Sterling. So I would say Sterling we're a Christian college, but you get players who maybe don't know the Lord. And so for us, that's unique to what I had at Trinity, where probably every girl or most girls knew the Lord and were walking faithfully with him. I think Sterling is cool because you get, some girls who love Jesus and are committed to that, and then some who are just kind of starting that journey. And so we incorporate it through I do team devos. So in the off season, we'll do just an optional Bible study at my house in the mornings once a week. And so I make a bunch of coffee, some baked goods, and whoever wants to comes and dives into the Word together. We do team devos before every game. I just think that's important to get their mindset right before games. That we're gonna talk tactics before games, but we're gonna focus on Jesus too. And so I kind of share that responsibility with me and my assistants, where we take turns doing some team devos before each game. We do a lot of like leadership meetings in the off season, and often those are biblical principles. And even if they're not necessarily just talking Jesus, I often incorporate the Bible, and so back up what we're talking about with Scripture, just because the girls who are pursuing Jesus, they really want that and are hungry for it. And the girls who maybe don't know the Lord, they're going to at least have principles being put in, into their life and allow conversations to happen. And so, it's not just, we pray before practice, right? But that doesn't, it can't just be a prayer before or after practice and that's it, right? Because you need to equip these girls. And so I think it's a combination for me right now of discipleship and evangelism. where the girls who are hungry and pursuing the Lord, I'm going to continue to push them and have conversations with them. This summer, we're doing an optional study of Romans. And so I've just given them each week chapters to read. And so it's cool to have girls text me about what they're learning and to be able to text them back and kind of talk through those things. And so we incorporated it a lot. And I would say a lot of it is just life on life with our students and talking through what they're going through. And, you know, I get with girls and coaching girls, you get the conversations of breakups and tears and, you know, the home life situations. And we just, a lot of, you know, my time and how Christ impacts my coaching is just how I love my players and how I serve them, and then how I show them Jesus on a daily basis. And so it comes into play a lot with things we do specifically in our program, but I think most importantly, it's just how I treat them, how we deal with conflict management in a way that shows Christ, right? I think they've learned a lot over the past year of me stepping in, of like, we're going to deal with the stuff that's going on this team, but we're going to deal with it in the right way, and we're going to make it evident that Christ is part of this. And you get that with girls, right? And so it's just preparing them for life after college. And I think for us, I don't know, I just love sports ministry because of that it's an avenue to incorporate Christ into what you do. And I think for me, as I continue to build culture, right, it takes time, but building culture, I'm excited for how much more we can do with it. We kind of started a small group thing this off season, but then it kind of got cut short with COVID. But we're going to start that up full force this fall, where each coach has a group of girls that they're just doing life with. And so each girl is specifically getting poured into from one of the coaches in a small group setting where they can be more vulnerable, you know, than large scale. And so the goal in that is eventually to be able to pass that on to players to lead well in small group settings. But I think we need to first show and lead in that before they can kind of take that over. But yeah, just a lot of stuff. And that's what I love about it. Right? I love soccer, but this kind of stuff gets me fired up.
That's so good. I love the intentionality behind that. And I love that you said you can't just be a good person. You got to speak, or you got to open up your mouth and speak about Jesus. And I like that 1 Peter 3:15, always be ready to give an answer with the hope that you have in Christ, and do it with gentleness and respect. Could you, before I pass it off to Aaron again, could you expand on that a little bit? Because you were I was going to lead into a culture question, but you were talking about that small group stuff that you do. What does that dynamic look like? How many assistant coaches do you have? How many groups do you have? And then when they break out, what are they discussing, or what does that time together look like for them?
Yeah, so this past year there were 3 different groups because it was me and 2 assistants. And so I kind of left it up to assistants to do. And like I said, we just were getting started with it as COVID happened and players were getting released for the summer. But it was 3 different groups, and I gave it kind of up to my assistants to, you know, do what they wanted, as we were kind of just starting it and testing the waters of let's just start by getting to know our players and being intentional about doing life with them. And so my assistants did a great job of going out to the local Mexican restaurant together, or going and getting coffee with them. And really it was just time apart from school to do life together. This fall, I think we'll start making it more structured. And so maybe we'll all study the same passage or that kind of thing, but in a small setting, because then I just think most teams in general, but mine, I know for a fact, in large scale settings, some girls don't ever talk, right? And so if you put them in a small setting, they're going to be more comfortable. They're going to have strengthened relationships with those girls. And so this fall, it's going to be probably 4 groups, because I think we're going to add in another assistant. And so 4 groups where it'll be a coach and probably 5-6 players that get to do life together throughout the school year. And so I think it's just a way for them to get to know each other, but then us to also intentionally, even if it's just praying for each other and knowing the needs of our team and what they're going through in their home life, in their, what stresses they have, all that stuff. And so it's kind of just evolving and starting small. But I'm excited for this fall to dive deeper into that. And then I'm excited for the future of being able to fully pass that on to our team when I feel like we are in a point where maybe we're have girls who are spiritually mature to lead those. But I think first we need to kind of show the way for the girls that I have on our team of let's love you well, and let's guide you, and let's equip you to then be able to do this.
Man, disciples making disciples. Sounds kind of familiar, huh, Ty? We're doing a lot of that with FC.
Love it.
And that's exactly the strategy that we have with FCA, and being able to see this firsthand with Morgan and the Sterling coaches, the 2 and 3, the coach has been awesome. And so on that point, you speak a lot about your experience at Trinity, and I think just from the conversations we've had, you kind of incorporate that with the way you coach and the way you handle your team and everything like that. What was the big impact? You even said, you're getting your master's just really to kind of glean more from your coach. What were some specifics that you got while you were playing, and then also GA right there, and so I guess what was a major impact and influence that you had while you were there at Trinity?
Yeah, I think so. The coach there, he's Patrick Gilliam. I think he's pretty known among Christian coaches just for his involvement in really integrating faith and athletics. I think for the first time in my life, I was shown what it looks like to bring your faith onto the soccer field. Before that, it was like, well, I'm a Christian, right? And I'm a Christian and I'm a soccer player. But I'm not gonna integrate them, right? And it was the first time where I was taught and shown that your faith and your athletics go hand in hand, and that soccer is a form of worship. Soccer is a form of ministry. And so he taught me a lot and showed me the way in that he's been there for over 20 years. And so he has built up a program where the culture is so unique and I think so rare that, I think he's a third most active winningest coach in the NAIA for women's soccer. So he knows how to win. But you talk to him and it's not about winning at all. It's about making disciples. And so I just think he showed me just the impact that you can have. And he talked all the time about life impact. But it was just the intentionality that he had. He's a workhorse, right? He dives into tactics like no other. He knows the game. But he also just spent so much time with us talking about our faith and talking about, things that go into that. And so, I think it was the big thing is just showing that you can't have soccer and Jesus apart. You need them together, and the impact that can have. And we experienced some cool moments where soccer looks like, and that it looks like blessing your opponents, right? We often have bitterness towards our opponents, and in college we had our rivals where it was we're going head in head for the national tournament. It's one of us makes it, one of us doesn't. Teaching us the officials, and how can we bless our fans through it, and just make people ask the question why. And so it was cool to see the fruit of that. At Trinity, we did testimony cards after the game. So we had each written up a testimony card. And as we shook hands after, we'd pass a card to the opponent. And it was really cool because there were games where teammates of mine had the person who received that testimony card reach out to them, because we had our name on it. So with social media, you could figure it out, and reach out and say that they were super blessed by applying us, and that they were challenged throughout the game with just wondering why. And we would share our testimony. We'd circle up afterwards with the opponent, and pray, and someone would share their testimony, and just like seeing people really question their life, and question what their life means and what soccer means, because soccer is going to end, right? And so I think it was just like a program and a coach that was fully built around both, right? It wasn't soccer, and it wasn't a Christian college and a soccer program. It was a Christ-centered program where we're going to talk about soccer in a way that's like, he refers to it as biblical soccer. Like we're gonna talk about soccer in the same sentence that we talk about Jesus, and that it's going to be a place where we are impacting lives, and our lives are impacted, but we're going to impact the lives of others too. And so just in all aspects of, I mean, I love the guy. He's like a second dad to me, like, because he's had that much impact, and he's had that much impact on, 20 years of players, but it's like, it's because he has a deep love for Jesus, and he pours that into what he does and what he does on the field. And so I think that was just, the first time in my life that I'd really experienced a coach that I'd had coaches who were believers before, but you wouldn't be able to tell on the field. But with him, you never doubted that. It was always the one thing that you knew was that he loved Jesus, and he was going to coach in a way that built you up and equipped you for what you were going to do next, right? And so I think it's just that idea of biblical soccer, and really just the need for that, especially on, I mean, you need it both places, but if you're a Christian college, you need to be having a biblical program, right? We need that, right? It's the problems when Christian colleges, you'd never know that they're a Christian college, right? And so I think it was that of just, I have the freedom to speak my faith, and so I need to freely do that, and I need to do that in a way that completely goes in line with my program, and I need to be true to that, right? And I think that's where my players, I want them to always know that, and I'm not going to be one person off the field and one person on the field. They know that I'm going to be the same regardless of what situation I'm dealing with, because that's what Jesus would do, right? We need to be a light in a really dark, athletics are dark, right? And so I think it's just that we have the freedom to do that as in a Christian college setting. And so we need to be the light, because I can speak openly and freely about my faith. And so, I mean, I could talk about the impact I had from Gilliam and Trinity soccer for hours, but just the idea of integrating faith in athletics. And it became a huge passion of mine through that.
That's so good. We always talk about that Billy Graham quote, that one coach will impact more people in a year than the average person will do in a lifetime. And I think I heard the story was like the reason that came about was a guy, he told Billy Graham, saw him at an airport or something, said he was thinking about going into ministry or coaching, and Billy Graham said, go into coaching because you'll impact more people. So it's cool to see the impact that coach at Trinity had on you, and it's continuing at Sterling. I'm going to throw a little curveball at you before Aaron closes it out, but have you had a worse coaching experience, a mistake? I know you have a short coaching career, so it could be coaching or your playing career. Worst mistake you've made, and maybe what you learned from there, what you gleaned from that experience. And that's kind of putting you on the spot. I'm sorry for that, but we like to do that.
Yeah, worst mistake I've made. I mean, I think I've made a lot of mistakes in my first year as a head coach. But I think one probably experience or mistake I made was just one season that was challenging of as an assistant being unified with my coach and my players when there's discrepancy and being the middleman. in how I handled situations like that, because it's like I care deeply about my players, but then there's like you need the level of respect from the top, and so I think as an assistant that was really hard. Of when there were situations that I was in disagreement with, and I tend to be really, really close with my players, and so players would come to me about situations, and just how I handled maybe situations where there's conflict, right? And I'm not the head, so I need to respect the head. And like my thing is, like as a head, I told my assistants from the very beginning, we're always going to be on the same page in front of the team. We can butt heads and we can disagree outside of the team, but in the team, like in front of the team, we got to be on the same page always. And I think there were situations where I wasn't on the same page with other coaches as an assistant, and probably didn't do the best job of how do I navigate this, because it was confusing to navigate, especially as a new coach, right? And it's like you want to hear your players out and you want to invest in them, but you also have to respect your coaching staff. And I'm not going to go into detail with that, obviously, but just like when there's discrepancies as an assistant, it was really hard. And I've heard of other assistants, especially at secular schools, where they have issues with their head coach who might not be a believer, and how they navigate respecting that head coach while also pouring into the players if there's issues between the head and the players. And so I know of other coaches who struggle with similar situations where as an assistant, I was just put in a really hard position a lot of times. And it's hard to know how to navigate that, especially as a young coach, and especially being super close to players. And so I think it was just, maybe some things that could have gone in back and done differently in those situations. But just some of the conflict of being an assistant coach when you don't necessarily agree with coaching staffs, and players are in the midst of that, and players are struggling, and how do you navigate and tend to each player but then also be on the same page as your coach even if you don't agree. And so just I don't know, maybe some issues there with not speaking up when I should have spoke up, or keeping stuff in when I should have let it out maybe. But I've made a lot of mistakes though, so it's but I think that was like my biggest struggle in the last 5 years is and difficulty of like, how do I navigate this?
That's a good one. I think a lot of assistant coaches struggle with that one. That's good.
Well, I think congratulations are in order because you're human, and so we have those for sure. But the last question that we like to ask is, and you've alluded to this quite a bit already, but as a head coach, what is it that you want your legacy to be with your players? Not only with players, with your assistant coaches. There at Sterling College, whether you're there for 20 years like your coach, or whether God calls you to another place. What is it that, in the way that we always preface it is, in 10, 15 years down the road, what do you want your players now that you'll see in 10, 15 years? What do you want them to say about you and your program? So, when you hear that term legacy, what is it that you want to have as your legacy as the coach?
Yeah, I think probably in like simplest terms, I'd want my legacy to be that I was just a piece of their walk with the Lord, that I was able to either challenge them in their faith to grow closer to Jesus, or to plant a seed that someday blossoms into a relationship with Jesus. I think it's just the idea of that their soccer experience as me as their coach was life impact. I think probably the way that I view my coach at Trinity, I want similarly my players to view me in that way, that not anything I did, but that Jesus was made known through a soccer program in the middle of rural Kansas, right? And so I just think it's, that something within them was challenged, that they were deeply loved during their playing time, and that they were strengthened in their faith with the Lord, just by the avenue that college soccer brings, and that I just might be a small piece in their journey, and so I guess that's probably the legacy I'd want them to have, or I'd want them to view is what I have.
Yeah. Well, Morgan, that's awesome. Obviously, you've had a great structure within family, within your coaches, and then it's been a blessing for me to see the. I couldn't believe it's only been going into a year. I mean, we've been doing ministry together, for it seems like a long time, but it's been awesome to see how you've evolved as a coach and just the things that you've done. So we appreciate your time. Certainly best of luck as you're navigating through all of the, as you said, the COVID stuff right now, and getting your girls back in a couple months, I guess. And, just keep fighting the fight. And you're doing a great job. And so I greatly appreciate you there.
Thank you. It's been fun to chat.
Thanks for joining us, Coach. Appreciate you.
Thanks.